My name is Charlotte Farrer, and today I will be discussing some research that I have collaborated for the Understanding Behavioural Management in Performing Arts Further Education. I'm currently studying at Bradford College in the Performing Arts Department. I'm teaching level 1, 2, 3 and year 2, and there I am teaching a range of ages and different abilities. The subject I'm going to be covering is behavioural management. This is a significant issue within all FE teaching, but especially within the performing arts. I've researched the topic in detail from both an academic and practical perspective. The topics I'll be covering today is a brief history of policies, why do we need behavioural management, managing behaviour, a holistic approach, and finally top tips.
A brief history of behavioural policies in education.
So here is a timeline of behavioural policies within the UK. So starting back from when schooling became compulsory to the common use of caning and corporal punishment up to around the 1980s where it was then banned. Since then, many behavioural policies have been passed to attempt to address disruptive behaviour within the education system. Even after a century of policies, there are still significant issues within the teaching practice. Moving on to behavioural management. So why do we need it?
Remember, I was never trained for this. I thought I would only be teaching my subject to people who wanted to learn.
This is a view that I shared when I started on my placement. Disruptive behaviour is behaviour which significantly interrupts the learning of others or threatens their personal security or well-being. And then below we have some examples of disruptive behaviour. So we've got talking while the teacher talks, using or answering mobile phones, expressing boredom and lack of interest, and bullying. So I've seen a lot of these examples on my placement, and I've had to deal with a lot of them as well. So, at the end of year 11, in compulsory education, the choice that most 16-year-olds face is to whether to stay in at school or go to further education, college. Often, employment is not a realistic option for most 16-year-olds because of the perceived lack of employment opportunities. Some students will have an unwillingness or an liability to stay on in school. This could be because of the particular curriculum area they wish to pursue, or simply that students did not like or haven't succeeded in school. There is also, of course, the possibility that the school did not want them. In theory, students have a choice about whether they study at further education level or not. However, in practice, it is more of a Hobson's choice. And Hobson's choice is only apparently free choice, in which there is no choice at all. Some students come from challenging backgrounds, personal backgrounds, which may affect their behaviour. Certain students will display a strong motivation to leave, but some learners will be challenging, confrontational, disengaging and unmotivating. A lot of the students in Bradford College who I'm teaching come to college after having a rough background at school, thinking that further education is a DOS. They've come from challenging personal backgrounds which has affected their behaviour, in which further education teachers need to respect this and support each student. Vocational nature of FE. So FE curricula are dominated by work-related qualifications, which are intended to allow students to progress into paid employment. However, there is often a view in society that work is seen as boring and mundane. This view is typically shared by learners, which result in a reduction in their motivation to learn when assessments and assignments attempt to mirror industry practice. There is also a view that work can only be achieved through the completion of a qualification. This creates a means to an end mentality and implies to students that education itself is not. Reeves describes this reward mentality as obtaining a reward by accreditation, not by gratification. Wallace expresses the view that further education colleges are often seen as extensions of schools, which extend compulsory education. FE becomes a holding station between school and work or school and higher education. The government report agrees that FE is a link between school and higher education and that the experience needs to be improved. Foster likens the FE experience to that of the disadvantaged middle child. There is a minimum standard of education required before an individual can progress and be let out of further education. This can affect learners' motivation and self-esteem. Such self-esteem issues lead to consequential increases in disruptive behaviour. What the experts say. Experts from across pedagogical research, such as the work of Rogers and Maslow, argues that feeling undervalued or a fear of mockery will act as a barrier to cooperation and learning. I feel this is a big thing at Bradford College because obviously performing arts, you've got to express yourself, and a lot of students who may have had a tough time at school find it hard to perform without feeling that other peers may mock them. So furthermore, a student's previous experiences, as I was saying, are likely to shape their capacity for disruptive behaviour. For example, behaviourist theory states that negative experiences previously inflicted during a learner's education process, such as during pre-16 compulsory education, will make them fearful and apprehensive of teachers. And Freud argues that earlier experiences may also set a pattern for learners' future behaviour. So going back again, students at Bradford College have had a tough time at school, they've been kicked out, so therefore, they come to college with a negative attitude. Wallace highlights the recent populist theories relating to the ideas that disruptive behaviour stems from too much television, alongside poor discipline in schools and at home. I don't agree with this comment by Wallace actually. I think that the students are taught in schools is the largest influence on their behaviour in further education. So now we know what disruptive behaviour is, so let's see how you're going to manage that behaviour.
I sometimes feel as if I spend my whole day trying to keep order and I do no teaching at all.
Promoting motivation. A key way of managing behaviour is to firstly remove the focus from behaviour and shift it to motivation. Through promoting learners' motivation of a subject and by focusing on the student's enjoyment of the experience rather than the consequences of studying, students can realise a passion for learning, and that in turn reduces the chances of disruptive behaviour occurring in the first instance. It is important that an FE teacher accepts students as individual people with individual needs. A focus on the individual's personal learning journey will break down barriers and previous misconceptions of how students interact with a teacher. Often students have previous experience conflict with teachers in the past or have gained very little self-esteem from their learning. So by taking a humanist approach to learning, an FE tutor must display a respect for individual students alongside displaying a trusting relationship. This creates an environment which encourages mutual respect and trust between both the student-teacher and the student-student relationships. These relationships allow learning to take place. Rogers expressed that relationships as unconditional positive regard. So it's all about making your lesson enjoyable, and then the students will actively engage because they're enjoying it. Moving on to Maslow's needs. So genuine trust and respect from a tutor will allow the learner to feel valued and safe, as well as increasing their self-esteem. Feeling safe and acquired self-esteem also form part of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. According to Maslow, in order for self-actualization learning to take place, we must take into account a learner's needs. A tutor cannot address all needs, but by taking into account a student's essential needs, disruptive behaviour can often be understood. Low self-esteem is one of the most common areas which results in disruptive behaviour, and self-esteem is therefore one of the most important needs that an FE teacher should look upon and build. Research highlights that utilising praise in the classroom is a key technique to improving students' learning engagement whilst also increasing self-esteem. However, make sure that praise is not sarcastic or patronising. It should always be sincere, specific and in context. Constant praise will quickly lose its value, but unexpected constructive praise will provide effective positive reinforcement. My students thrive from praise, and I think this is probably due to having a negative comments in school and probably not enough genuine, personal and constructive praise. So I do this constantly in my practice, and I found that my students are motivated by praise. Negative behaviour. Unwanted behaviour may also occur. A student may be disruptive since they perceive that any attention is better than no attention. Alongside understanding the other factors contributing to such behaviour, it is often wise to ignore the bad behaviour as much as possible. It is important to make the student understand that being disruptive is not an effective way to recognise your attention and that unwanted behaviour is not acceptable. A learning agreement is an individual document used throughout a student's programme, which are useful in identifying personal goals and barriers for each individual student. Alongside setting clear expectations from the outset of a module or unit, Bradford College uses this so the students will gain a clear appreciation for what constitutes acceptable and unacceptable behaviour. Understanding students' individual needs is vital, and through taking a firm but fair approach to dealing with unwanted behaviour, the classroom can become a more focused learning environment. I received recent feedback from my mentor on one of my observations that I was firm but fair, and this is because of my good rapport with my students.
All too often, teachers and the media perceive behaviour management to be solely concerned with establishing control over disruptive pupils. With this perception, it's not surprising that trainees continue to report that they feel inadequately prepared, given that they cannot realistically anticipate and prepare for the entire range of pupil responses that they will experience in the classroom. As a consequence, trainees and teachers continue to seek more and more strategies in the hope that they will be better able to cope with anticipated classroom disruption.
So the key here is to focus on motivation and understand the individual in order to proactively manage their behaviour. Understanding. Managing behaviour can only take place when behaviour is understood. The model shown by Powell and Todd illustrates the wider relationship which contributes to learning. Until these relationships are in unison, learning cannot take place to its full potential. It is our job as tutors to try and ensure a learning environment is both available and utilised effectively. And finally, helpful top tips for behavioural management. Top tips for improving behaviour management. I found from my practice that some of these top tips below are really effective, such as being passionate. Coming to class with motivation and a positive attitude reflects on your students, making them positive and motivated. Use sincere praise. Using praise helps motivate the student. It gives off positive attitude. It helps them feel good about themselves. Give mutual respect. Speak to them how you'd like to be spoken to. Or, here is an alternative way to deal with disruptive behaviour.
Underdressed and freezing cold, 40 South Korean teenagers are learning army-style discipline. Trainer Park Tae-jin says the boot camp aims to develop students' strength and perseverance.
자신감이 없는 학생에게 자신감을 길러주고
It instills confidence in students who lack it. We try to positively alter their attitude. Many students grow up without many hardships, and so some aren't mature enough. We also focus on character development during the training.
이걸 진행하고 있습니다.
The training program consists of either a 5 or 14-day schedule, lasting up to 9 hours a day. Many were signed up by their parents.
At first I was really mad with my parents for making me train in this cold weather, but now I know that they did it because they love me.
I would misbehave when my parents weren't watching. From now on, I promise I will behave even when they're not watching me. And I will concentrate on my studies and will be obedient to my parents.
The camp has trained around 100,000 students since 1997, and this winter 200 students will discover the joys of army instruction. At least this camp allows students to really express their pain.
I prefer this method. Facilitate the motivation, understand the individual, and manage the behaviour.